Good Friday morning, everybody. How are you? Welcome to sports. I'm Emerson Lotzia. So for the next hour, what the show called The Sweat will bring you is endless entertainment and lots of DFS and betting information you can't get anywhere else, and that is not a guarantee. On the menu, ALCS showdown picks, who to build your NBA and NHL lineups around, plus best NFL bets available on the DraftKings Sportsbook. And oh my God, would you look at this? Our NFL panel is here and ready to rock already. DraftKings contributor Pierce Dietrich on the left, Matt Meiselman on the right. This segment is called NFL High or Low, so are the following spreads or player props too high, too long, or too low, which means too short. New England favored by 6.5. Oh, take it on the Jets. Too long or too short, Pierce?
That's too low of a number. Everyone knows the Patriots own the Jets, 19-3 over the last 10 seasons. Now, against the spread, the Patriots are just 10-12, so half the time they failed to cover against the Jets. But most of the time, the spread with Tom Brady and the Patriots is much, much larger. So it's hard to cover spreads when you have to win by 2 touchdowns. The magic number has really been when it's around a touchdown or less. That's when the Patriots always cover. And so right here in this spot, I think you're going to be fine. We saw in the first matchup, the Patriots were favored by a touchdown and absolutely smoked the Jets. We know what Belichick's going to do. He's going to shut down Corey Davis. And when you shut that down, there's pretty much nothing the Jets are going to be able to do. Zach Wilson will just struggle. And I think it'll be another easy win for the Patriots.
Yeah, what do you think here, Matt? Patriots are 2-4, all 4 losses coming at home here, and they are at home in Foxborough.
So when I first looked at this line, I actually agreed very strongly with Pierce. It was like, why are the Patriots only -6.5? They're the much better team. And the more I look at this, the more I'm starting to move the other way. I think defensive injuries on the Patriots side are a factor. And then just like this, sometimes football is weird and we don't really know what's going to happen. So maybe just taking a look at what most people are betting on gives some indication. And we're getting something like 86% of the bets and 93% of the handle on the Patriots to cover. I don't know that necessarily means the Jets are a good bet, but it does give me some hesitancy. I do think, though, that this line will reach 7 at some point. If I can give a real concrete prediction there, if you do like the Jets, wait. If you don't, if you like the Patriots, you probably want to get it now, because I do think with so many people betting New England, this line probably will go up. But if I have to pick, I'm leaning Jets, but this should be close to the number.
Okay, well, speaking of New England here, Tampa Bay and Tom Brady are favored by 12 hosting Chicago. Where are you going here, Matt?
This one I think is really fair. So I'm just going to give the boring answer with this game. Like, to me, it seemed like this line could have been anywhere between the 10 and 14 point numbers, which are like the 2 key numbers on either side, and anywhere around 11, 12, or 13. More or less, it's the same thing. Tampa's a really good team. I don't think Chicago's that bad of a team. Maybe they're average, maybe a little below average. So this number just kind of feels right. I don't really want to go too high or too low. I'll save that one for the next game.
Okay, how about you, Pierce?
Well, I'll play the game. I'll say it's too low. You look at Tampa, when they've been double-digit favorites, they cover both times against Atlanta and against Miami. I know that people expected them to cover against New England, but New England was really up for that game, so they didn't cover there. And then on a short week, playing on the road against Philadelphia, they just barely missed a cover there as well. Tampa's the better team. You can't run on Tampa, so it's going to have to be the Justin Fields show. And Chicago really doesn't want Justin Fields to do anything. They're trying to hide him, and now he's going to have to be front and center in this offense. I just don't see it working out for Chicago, and we could easily see another Tom Brady 5-touchdown performance. So if they cover, they're going to go way over this.
Yeah, you thought a 12-point spread was big. The Rams are favored by a beefy 15.5 points. That's not even the biggest spread on the Sunday slate. So the Rams are hosting Detroit. Stafford's revenge game. Aaron Darnold is out for blood. So Pierce, too high or too low here? 15.5.
I can't believe I'm going to say this. I guess too low. These numbers are through the roof this week. These matchups are crazy, but Detroit is terrible, and they're just going to get worse. I don't see this team getting any better moving forward. The defense just got destroyed last week against the Cincinnati team that's good, but not nearly as good as Los Angeles. And Los Angeles has a really good defense. I think it's really safe to imagine that Detroit falls behind early. They get one-dimensional. They're already no-dimensional. Now you're just going to force a team that can't pass to pass all game. It's going to be a long day for Detroit, and Los Angeles should just absolutely run away with this game.
Yeah, Maddie, how do you feel about this one?
So I do kind of think the Lions can keep this close. And the fact that I'm going to mention Jared Goff also having revenge kind of scares me a little bit. Like, I don't think that's the reason. It's more just this is a lot of points. And I think the Rams are a really good team, but I'm not sure they're quite as good as like maybe they've looked recently. They just had a dominating win over the Giants. I think the Rams are in contention for best team in the NFL. But I've said this many times this season. I don't think anyone's great. So the top tier of teams, I just don't think they're that much better than the middle tier. Obviously, the Lions are not in the middle tier. They are one of the worst teams in the NFL. 15.5 points is just a lot. And this, I guess if the revenge for Jared Goff means anything, it just means the Lions aren't going to roll over in this game. Like if they're thinking about tanking away the rest of their season, I think that probably starts next week because there's so much like emotionally at stake with this one. So at least I don't have the concern that they're just going to give up on this game. And the Lions do have, I guess, some decent offensive players, DeAndre Swift, TJ Hawkinson. Like, I think they can score points here. We've seen the total kind of moving up. It opened below 50. Now we're up to 51. I think this could be a somewhat high-scoring game. Maybe the Lions end up with a backdoor cover like they had in week 1. So that's kind of where I'm leaning.
Well, Goff's girlfriend did say yesterday on Instagram that they are enjoying the change of pace in Detroit. So maybe he is happy there. And this isn't a Goff revenge game, Matt. Patrick Mahomes, let's go to some player props. Patrick Mahomes, 325.5 passing yards at Tennessee in a game that we could see 900 points scored. This player prop too high or too low? Matt.
I think it's too high. Like, I think Mahomes should do really well this week. I think the Chiefs probably win. I think we do see a high scoring game, but 325 yards, it's just a lot of yards. Like, we already have this priced into the betting line too, where we have a total at 57.5. I don't think the high scoring game is going to sneak up on anyone. Like, the Chiefs can win something like, I don't know, 31-27. Game comes in right around the number. Mahomes throws for 280 yards because the Chiefs have the lead. And that's really what this comes down to. If you think the Chiefs are leading in the second half, Mahomes just doesn't need to throw as much. They lean on the running game. So I think that that's probably the way this one goes. I think Kansas City, maybe they don't necessarily cover the spread, but I think they will have a lead in the second half most likely, and Mahomes just won't need to air it out. His biggest passing games come in games like Washington last week where they actually were trailing and Mahomes needed to air the ball out. They've had some games recently where they've been struggling, so I don't really see that being the case. I don't think the Titans are nearly as good of a team as the Chiefs are, and Mahomes maybe just can have a comfortable lead in the second half where the yards don't need to be there.
Pierce, what do you think? 325.5 passing yards right now for Patrick Mahomes on the DK Sportsbook.
That's too low. I completely disagree with Matt on this. We saw the Titans last week just basically relentlessly put points up on a Buffalo defense that's really good. And Kansas City has a fraction of the defensive talent that Buffalo has. I just don't see how Kansas City is going to stop Derrick Henry, or at least to the point that Kansas City can be comfortable and take their foot off the gas. I think at best this game remains close, and if it remains close, Kansas City is going to have to keep passing the ball. Tennessee has a decent run defense. And I mean, we saw it last week. Washington had a decent run defense. Kansas City passed for, over 400 yards. I think Patrick Mahomes is going to constantly air the ball out. And plus, that's the big weakness for the Titans this week. They put 2 of their starting cornerbacks on the IR. Another one is questionable. So there was already holes in this terrible pass defense. Now it's that much worse. I got to imagine that Andy Reid is going to attack through the air on Sunday.
All right, dude, one more here for you, Pierce. Cordarrelle Patterson, 80.5 total rushing and receiving yards combined at Miami. What you feeling here?
I'm going to say too low. I'm going to hedge here at the end. But if you look at the last game that they played in London, his snaps were through the season high in snaps, season high in targets, season high in routes. Basically, everything was through the roof. Now, there is an asterisk there. We do know that Calvin Ridley and Russell Gage didn't play in those games, and those players are both going to be back, so that could cut into snaps and targets and routes for Cordarrelle Patterson. But you see that the way he's been playing, they've had a bye week to continue to work him into the system. It would be foolish for the Falcons in a game where you've got a Dolphins defense that hasn't played well to just put him back on the bench. They've got something here, and they need to keep working with him. He's probably the only chance they have of surprising people by winning more than 500 games this season. So I'm going to go too low. but it could be easily a Calvin Ridley week.
Yeah, Matt, Atlanta's jack of all trades here, dude. Any reason to expect he's going to slow down in week 7?
So this game is really intriguing to me. I'll kind of tease this for a later segment because I think the Falcons are just really overvalued in general here. But for Patterson specifically, he's been so much better than Mike Davis that, like, I do think kind of what Pierce was saying is that we should see his workload keep increasing even with their receivers coming back. This is a big number now, though. Like earlier in the season, I think you could have gotten a rushing receiving prop on Patterson for half of this amount. Now we're up to 80.5. So I think I'm leaning towards it being too low. This is going to be a weird game, though. We might have some rain in the forecast, and it's just like I don't know how these teams are going to play. I think both of them are pretty bad, but I'm leaning towards the over here. It's just like I think this game can go any number of directions, especially if the weather becomes a factor. So it's not my most confident take, but I do think Patterson will be a big factor in this game.
All right, well, I need you two to hang out because you're going to be sharing your best NFL bets all over the DraftKings Sportsbook coming up. Plus, Pierce has some NASCAR price check for you, and Maddie's going to bring his NBA DFS knowledge to the table. But first, we have some ALCS Game 6 plays to share with you. The Red Sox, everybody, are 6-0 all-time in Game 6 of the ALCS. If they do not make it 7-0 this evening, their season is over because Houston has them against the ropes. And DraftKings contributor Steve Buchanan, a Red Sox fan, and RotoWire's Eric Halterman are here to share their approach to this showdown. Steven, who was your captain for this contest?
Yeah, this is a tough matchup here because obviously the stock couldn't be lower on Nathan Eovaldi, who had that really rough inning a couple of games ago. But if that call was gone correctly, maybe things look different. I'm avoiding both pitchers in this one, so I'm going to be going with Kyle Schwarber as my captain in this one. Luis Garcia has really struggled against lefties, most specifically this year. You look at his numbers this year against them. 4.55 FIP, 348 WOBA, 13 of the 19 home runs that he's allowed. This has been a struggle spot for him, and Schwarber probably back at the top of the lineup here tonight, collecting at least 5 at-bats in this game. Good chance for him to park one potentially in this game, so I think he's a good, viable captain option for tonight.
Okay, how about you, Eric?
Well, the default captain choice for any showdown contest is going to be a starting pitcher, but I'm with Steve here in that I'm just pretty scared of both of them. Eovaldi coming off that poor relief appearance. We saw what that did to Julio Urias when he had a pretty similar setup, got knocked around in relief, came back 3 days later and had quite a poor start. So I'm scared of him, and I'm quite scared of Luis Garcia, as we might get into a bit later. So I think the game plan here is to just try to get in all the homers you can. And I think the easiest way to do that is to roster the cheapest guys who might homer as your captain. I think the cheapest big bat for the Astros, if you're building an Astros-based lineup, will be Carlos Correa. If you're building a Red Sox-based lineup, it would be Xander Bogaerts. I think one of those two guys, Correa's even cheaper at 11,100 as a captain. So he's maybe my slightly preferred option because, again, the game plan here is can I get all of the home runs that happen tonight, and there are likely to be a few. There are in many of these playoff games. Can I get all of them into my lineup, and then I have a good chance at winning?
Eric, how about some value, dude?
Yeah, again, because the goal is to get as many of those top hitters as we can, we need to go all the way to the bottom. Christian Arroyo is a guy I've mentioned throughout this series. He costs the absolute minimum at 4,000. He will play. He is a real hitter, 106 WRC plus on the regular season. Nothing exciting, but he'll be in your lineup. He'll save you as much money as possible. He might get a couple points. And on the Astros side, Chas McCormick will probably be the center fielder. He costs only $400 more than the minimum. He had a 109 WRC plus in the regular season. So those two guys, I think you almost have to get in there so you can get as many of the big bats as possible.
Steve, and save us some cash, dude.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Alex Verdugo in this spot. Like I mentioned here, Luis Garcia has really struggled against lefties. And, Verdugo's gone 0 for 6 over his last 2 games. But with that said, he collected at least 1 hit in every playoff game since then. He's only, when you get him in the utility spot, he's only going to cost you $7,000, which is on the cheaper end because some of these guys are very expensive here. Probably hitting 6th in the lineup tonight, too. So probably won't be overly popular when it comes to ownership. But this is somebody who's done very well in the playoffs, except for the last 2 games. And really, quite frankly, that's been the story for the whole Red Sox offense. But at $7K for somebody who has the ability to get on base, maybe even get an extra base hit, I think he's a pretty good value tonight.
All right, what about someone you're totally fading, Bukes?
Yeah, I'm going to be going with Kike Hernandez at this rate. He's still priced very, very high. He's been basically the reason why the Red Sox have gotten as far as they has, but he's been cooling off. I mean, he's now 0 for his last 13. He's only collected a couple hits in his last few games, but he's just so overpriced for his role on this team. Like, yes, he's been a hero for this team, but this is not somebody who gets on base consistently. So getting him at this price, you're getting him at really the ceiling price at this point. So he's someone I'm fading. I'd much rather go for someone at like Rafi Devers, who's just a little bit more if I'm paying up that much for a hitter.
Okay, Eric, how about you, dude?
Yeah, Steve's absolutely right there. Hernandez being the second most expensive hitter, there's just no way he's the second most talented hitter in these 2 games, even if he's been hot lately. So that's definitely correct. But I think I'm even more scared of both starting pitchers. Like I mentioned earlier, Luis Garcia, 3 straight bad starts. He closed the regular season with 6 earned runs in 5 innings. His start in the ALDS saw him give up 5 earned runs in 2 2/3, and his start in Game 2 of the ALCS saw him give up, again, 5 earned runs in just 1 inning, and then he left with a knee issue. He's a talented pitcher, but that's about as bad of a run as you can have coming in. I don't think he's going to get many innings at all. And Eovaldi on the other side has been quite good for much of the playoffs, although, again, coming off that relief appearance, I don't think they're going to let him go all that deep in a must-win game here. I think if he's at all shaky, he's gone after about 4 innings.
Let's switch real quick here to the DK Sportsbook, gentlemen. Give me your favorite bet for Game 6 of the ALCS tonight, Eric.
We're going to see runs. I've been saying it all series, and it's been true. The overs just set at 9 runs. These 2 teams have hit that over in 4 of the 5 games this series, and in the lone game where they didn't, they got exactly 9. And if you look back at the ALDS, both teams were involved in games that scored more than 9 runs in 3 of the 4 games in their ALDS matchup. So that's combined 10 out of 13 playoff games that one or both of these teams has been involved in, has hit at least 10 runs. These are 2 teams we knew it going in. They're very offense-heavy teams. The series has played out exactly that way. I'd expect it to continue to do so here, given, again, especially how shaky Garcia is, but a bit of shakiness with Eovaldi as well.
What about you, Steve? What's your favorite bet for tonight?
Yeah, taking Luis Garcia to go over 3.5 hits allowed at -135. This is someone who, like we said, has struggled all throughout the playoffs. And you say all throughout the playoffs, they're talking about 3 2/3 innings, but he's given up 10 runs on 7 hits in that span. Like, I think he's going to be out of this game early. And if he's out of this game early, it's likely because he got hit hard. So if that's the case, 3.5 hits just feels like a really low number at 135. A little bit of juice on that for sure. Oh, and look, it's gone up to 140. So people love it. People absolutely love it. They're already going down there and betting the over, as they should be. But over 3.5 runs for Luis Garcia tonight. I think he's out of this game early, and there's a big reason why, because he's given up a bunch of hits.
All right, just like that, your job here is done, gentlemen. See if you can go back to fighting weird, strange people on Twitter. Who to build your NBA lineups around at each position is next, right after Pierce Dietrich's latest, greatest NASCAR price check.
Oh, great.
Welcome to the Price Check. I'm Pierce Dietrich. Let's look at the salaries for Kansas, whose salary jumped up this week. Kyle Larson, 10,500 up to 11,700. Time to read the receipts. Back in May, I said he was the Michael Jordan of NASCAR. How do you like me now? Denny Hamlin, 9,900 up to $11,000. He's partnered with Michael Jordan, but he's not Michael Jordan. He's the Scottie Pippen of NASCAR. Bubba Wall, 6,400 up to 7,400. His boss is Michael Jordan, but he is the Michael Jordan of baseball of NASCAR. Whose salary dropped this week? Kevin Harvick, 10,900 down to 8,900. They competed last week. They were solid, but at no point were they a contender. Never. Chase Briscoe, 7,900 down to 6,600. Not a fan, think he's overrated. So take note when I say he's been a top 15 driver in the last 2 intermediate track races. Justin Haley, 6,500 down to 5,800. Why does his salary keep changing? Just leave it on the bottom. He stinks. He's a nobody. Favorite play of the week, William Byron, 9,500, arguably the second best driver in the 550 package. He can finish second by Larson, get place differential points, and some hog points. Ryan Preece, 5,700. He's a 25th place driver. That won't work, but a tiny break gets him to 20th place, and that will work. All right, guys, check out DK Nation for all your DFS information and needs. If you got NASCAR questions, find me on Twitter at Race for the Prize. I'm Pierce Teacher. Catch me every morning on The Sweat.
We have got ourselves a chunky 10-game slate in the association tonight, and here to help all of you make a profitable evening this evening is going to be DraftKings contributor Matt Musselman. You got RotoWire's Nick Whalen here in the house. Kenny Ducey will be joining us here in just a second. So this segment is called Building Blocks. You guys tell us who your favorite DFS plays are at each position, starting with your favorite play at center. 2 dudes, 10 grand or more. You building around one of them, Nick?
I don't know if I am. I think I'm going to look at Domantas Sabonis, who's just below that price point. He's at 9,000 going up against Washington. Had a huge game in the opener against Charlotte. Indiana, of course, ends up blowing that game, but Sabonis was essentially the reason that they built a huge lead early on. He had 20-plus points in the first half alone. Obviously, he's a great rebounder. He's a great passer. He's become a much better three-point shooter. So I think he's a really good value at 9,000. And on the other side of that matchup, if you want to save some money at center, you can get Daniel Gafford at just 5,200. That's a really good price for a starting center. And Montrezl Harrell, who's kind of looking like he's going to be maybe their backup 5, backup 4, played a ton of minutes on opening night. He's at 5,400. So I think there's a lot of options in that Indiana-Washington game.
Okay, Matt, how about you, dude?
Yeah, so I agree with Nick that Sabonis is a good value there. And I think he may be the second most popular center, with Christian Wood down at 7,100 being the guy that most people go to. For me, I think it is worth paying up. And you mentioned 2 10K centers. One of them is still questionable for tonight's game. That's Joel Embiid.
That didn't take long, right? Didn't take long for him to land on the injury report.
Yeah, right. Lot of turmoil in Philly at the moment. So, certainly didn't take long. And I think that'll scare some people away. And they may just want to go to Nikola Jokic or someone cheaper. But Embiid is in a great spot against the Nets, who don't have a center who can defend him. Embiid has massive upside against anybody, and I think that the injury tide will scare people off. So obviously this is contingent on him actually playing tonight, but if Embiid's out there, I think he winds up being a really contrarian play, and it's not like he's overpriced or anything. 10K is reasonable for Joel Embiid. He could put up 75 fantasy points, so I think he might be the player on this slate who has the most upside. And I think that his ownership winds up really low just because of the injury scare.
Hey, Kenny, for your building block at center, you want to pay up or are you going to save some cash?
Yeah, you want to talk about things that aren't going well right now. You want to talk about upside. I think it's the Chicago Bulls tonight. And I like Nikola Vucevic here at $7,800. Look, he's coming off a 30 BK fantasy point game, but I just think that the price is really good here on Vucevic when you consider the Pelicans just aren't that team that they were a year ago, right? Remember last year, they brought in Steven Adams. They had Zion Williamson. Very physical down low, one of the best rebounding teams in the league. They were the best rebounding team for most of the NBA season. And this is just not the same team. There's been a lot of roster turnover. Obviously, Zion's not playing right now. No Steven Adams. So I think that this is a matchup here I'm not scared of. And to get Vucevic here at $7,800, a very talented offensive player, someone who I think is going to be relied upon a lot in the Chicago Bulls season. Probably going to be a lot of brick threes from Caruso, some more rebounds for Vucevic, and I just think that this is, I don't know, it's a pretty good price for him at this stature at this point of the season. But I don't really disagree with what the other guys are saying.
Nick, take us to forward. Who's your favorite play there?
I'll throw out a few names. I like Michael Porter Jr. going up against San Antonio tonight. 6,300 feels like a really affordable price for him. He was fairly quiet in Denver's opener against Phoenix the other night, just took 10 shots in 34 minutes. I think he gets going, comes out a little more aggressively tonight. OG Anunoby, 6,200 at Boston, had a horrific shooting night in their opener against Washington, just 3 of 17 from the field. But I think it's a great sign that he took 17 shots in 34 minutes, still finished with a double-double, still added his usual steals and blocks contributions. I think he's in for a pretty nice bounce back. Some people might have been scared away by that opening night performance. And then if you want to save even more money, I think Lauri Markkanen at 5,200 against Charlotte is a really nice value. I don't necessarily agree with the way that Cleveland is handling this lineup, putting him at small forward. I don't think that's optimal. But he played 31 minutes in the opener, took 14 shots. I thought he looked pretty good. And Cleveland appears committed to just using Kevin Love in like a 15 to 20 minute per game role off the bench. So if that means Markkanen's going to see 30 to 35 minutes on most nights, I think him at 5,200 is going to end up being a really nice value.
Okay, how about you, Matt?
So if Embiid doesn't play tonight, we have Tobias Harris at 7,200, who probably isn't even fadeable, even if every lineup has him. Like, Philly will have virtually no one else to take over their offense, with Ben Simmons also not playing. At that point, though, maybe there are better options, just because like he's going to be so popular in that situation. So the thing that I'm looking at, and just across the board, this could be a big factor tonight, is if Embiid's out, the Nets are in so much better of a spot offensively, with the Sixers defense taking this massive hit. Embiid's a great offensive player, but he's perhaps even better defensively, especially because of the value he provides protecting the rim. So Kevin Durant is fairly expensive at 9,300. And I think if Embiid's out, people will just play Harris. And then you have Kuzma, Scotty Barnes. There's a bunch of other forwards who are cheap. Nick mentioned Michael Porter Jr. Paying up for Durant, I don't know that too many people get to that. And the Nets are just in such a strong spot if Embiid's out. So it's contingent on that, of course. We don't know if Embiid's going to play at this point. But I really like Durant either way, honestly, but even more so if Embiid's not playing.
Who's your pick at forward, Kenny?
I'm going to go with the guy by the name of LeBron James at $9,100. I know that this is, we're talking about good value plays. But look, I think that LeBron here, you look at the way that he attacked the Suns last year and look at the way that he played on opening night against the Warriors. Guys, the Lakers took 42 threes against the Warriors. They have no shooters. And well, they have some shooters, but they were hurt, right? There was no Wayne Ellington for this game. LeBron took 11 threes. And while, you might say that he's not a three-point shooter, maybe at this stage in his career, he's trying to become a three-point shooter and save his body a little bit for the stretch run. I do think that there's some upside here with all those threes because first of all, he hit a lot of them. He hit 5. But also, look, I just think that LeBron is still used as the primary option. I think there was a lot of concern about what's going to happen with Russell Westbrook. How much of the ball is he going to have? I think that it's pretty clear here that LeBron's going to get the usage in LA's offense. So I think that against the Suns last year, he was averaged 3 threes on 8 attempts. And I think that LeBron here is going to be a pretty good option. I think that he gives you a lot of 3-point upside, and he gives you a lot of usage and a lot of leverage on this slate.
Who would you build around at guard, Matty?
So, again, if Embiid doesn't play, I love James Harden. The Nets would just be in such a strong spot there. But we do have another injury situation to monitor, and Bradley Beal is the other guy who we don't know if he's going to play or not tonight. So I think it's similar to Embiid, where if Beal's in, you can get him lower owned because the injury tag has been there and people might be scared off. If Beal doesn't play, we now have Spencer Dinwiddie basically taking over that offense. So it's really an either or. Like, I want to play a Wizards guard somewhere. If Beal's in, I think Beal's a great play. And if Beal's out, Dinwiddie is probably the slate's best value play. So I think you can kind of go either way there and just wait for the news to break.
Kenny, how about you, dude?
I'll take Mike Conley at $5,700. I still think it's pretty cheap considering the Sacramento Kings play zero defense, and I don't think much is going to change this year. I think that he's going a little bit overlooked on this slate. I also like Evan Fournier, a little bit more expensive, but 25% usage rate in the opening game. We know what he did with a 30-point game. I think that he's going to be relied upon a little bit more than people might have expected when he was signed. Kemba Walker was not really a big factor in the Knicks' backcourt. Derrick Rose played sparingly, and so did Emmanuel Quickley. I think that Evan Fournier is in line for another big game, a lot of minutes against his former team, the Orlando Magic. I think he could be in for a good one as well.
Hey, Nick, you building around someone with a lofty price tag?
I do like Devin Booker at 8,200, but I think you can actually save a decent amount of money and still get some borderline elite options at guard. I think LaMelo Ball at 7,700 feels like a really, really nice early season discount. That price probably rises fairly consistently as the year goes on. Granted, he's probably not hitting 7 threes in 29 minutes like he did on opening night, but I mean, he's also an all-around guy. He had 9 rebounds, 7 assists, 2 steals in that game. The matchup against Cleveland is obviously pretty appealing. I think Fred VanVleet is a really nice discount as well at 6,900. And then one game that I think I'm going to try to target overall in my lineups is this OKC Houston game, which it could be kind of a disaster in terms of quality of play, but I think there's a potential for a ton of points. Neither of these teams are going to be very good on defense. So I think someone like Jalen Green at 4,800 going up against OKC, he looked a little overmatched against Minnesota in the opener, but I think the Thunder are a bit more of an advantageous opponent.
All right, before we let you guys go, let's get your favorite sports book NBA play of the night. Kenny.
Well, I kind of tipped my hand with the LeBron James call, but I
Yeah.
like LeBron James over 2.5 threes at plus 110 on the DraftKings Sportsbook. I think this is a really good price. Again, he averaged 3 makes on 8 attempts against the Suns in all the games that they played last year between the regular season and the postseason. If I have to pick a side here on the slate, I'll take the Bulls to cover -6 against the Pelicans. This is an awful team in New Orleans.
Okay, Nick.
I like both of those calls by Kenny. I'll take the Hornets to cover 2.5 at Cleveland. I am off the Cavaliers in every way possible. I'll take OKC Houston over 221. That number is down 3 points from when I last checked it last night. Jalen Green over 12.5 points, by the way, -130. I really like that. And I'll take the Suns +1 over the Lakers. I don't really like what I've seen from the Lakers. I don't trust that roster construction. Outside of AD and LeBron, this is a team that doesn't have a lot of options. And like Kenny alluded to earlier, still no Kendrick Nunn, no Talen Horton-Tucker, no Wayne Ellington, no Trevor Ariza. Unfortunately for the 2021 Lakers, those are all very meaningful losses.
All right, Matt, bring us home, dude. Need your best bet.
So Nick just laid this out with the Lakers and Suns, and I think it's worth mentioning the Suns are plus 220 for the division, and the Lakers are even money. And this game's essentially pick 'em in LA. So like odds makers think the Suns are the better team, but on the futures market, the Lakers are the better team. Like I can't imagine it's just because Trevor Ariza and a bunch of other backups are out. I think what really is true is that the Suns are actually a much better team than the Lakers this year. Russell Westbrook isn't that good. So it's not that I think that there's value on this game tonight. I think the line has actually already moved from +3.5 to +1 for the Suns. I think the value is on the futures market where the Lakers are still overwhelming favorites in the division, and the Suns should be the favorites in my mind. I just don't think this Lakers team is going to be able to sustain a really good regular season with so little depth around their 2 stars. And I am leaving out Russell Westbrook. I don't think he's on the same level as LeBron and AD. Might be a bold take, but
Ooh.
the Suns are the better team. I don't think they should be +220 for the Pacific.
Okay. My little bold potato chips. Appreciate you guys. RotoWire's finest will join us coming up to help you build some money-making sticky puck lineups right after we take a look at this week's NFL slate featuring our Hall of Fame friend, The Bus.
Jerome Bettis here. Welcome to this week's Breakdown with the Bus, presented by Modelo.
Jerome, thank you so much. Now on to 2 far less handsome men. Reed Fowler, I am Adam Kaufman, and this is the DraftKings Week 7 Sunday main slate. Of course, Reed, we're always talking with our friend Jerome Bettis, The Bus. This is the Breakdown with the Bus. That in mind, I always ask you, give me a running back who's going to go off here in the main slate in Week 7, but maybe, just maybe, we could look at the running back position as a whole.
Yeah, I like a singular game for the running backs here, Koff.
Okay.
The Miami and Atlanta. So Atlanta is traveling down to Miami, and I think the Falcons running backs, Cordell Patterson, boy, you see the Swiss Army knife, and Mike Davis. Look, we've seen this Miami team give up the 3rd most DK fantasy points to opposing running backs. And also, we've seen a backfield with 2 running backs that they feature in the Buffalo Bills, with Zach Moss and Devin Singletary, do well. And so Mike Davis might be a viable option at his low $5,000 price tag. Cordell Patterson, we know what he can do, so I like that game. And even Myles Gaskin, I think, is viable. So Miami, Atlanta, I like that game for the running backs.
Patterson has been absurd this year. Rushing game, receiving game, it's nuts. All right, so tell us how we approach the Sunday main slate in general when it comes to one game, one in particular that will give us a lot of real points, a lot of fantasy points. What do you expect?
So that Kansas City-Tennessee game should give us a ton, right? And Kansas City, they got back on. Tennessee secondary is a little banged up. But I like the Cincinnati at Baltimore. We've seen the Ravens Ravens now put up a ton of points against good defenses. Cincinnati is a team now to be reckoned with. They got a lot of pass catchers there, so that's a game that I like.
All right, thank you, Reed. I am Adam, and of course, thank you, Jerome, the Bus. This is the Breakdown with the Bus, presented by Modelo.
It is time to build the best possible hockey lineup your imagination can imagine, with some sports betting sprinkled in as well. Here to help on this 4-game slate is the ravishing RotoWire duo of AJ Scholes and Paul Bruno. And I know before, producer Tom brought up to me, says, hey, you said RotoWire's finest, as we were leaving a segment, NBA segment with Nick Whalen. He is RotoWire's finest when it comes to the NBA. I'm talking RotoWire's finest when it comes to hockey, y'all. And we're going to start on the DraftKings Sportsbook. Love you, Nick. What is the best money line on the board as we have opening face-off coming at you? AJ.
Well, I think you have to look at Edmonton over the Golden Knights here at plus 120. Yes, the Oilers are entering game 2 of a back-to-back, and they're going to be taking the unusual step of starting Mikko Koskinen 2 days in a row. They've got a bunch of time off after this. Mike Smith is hurt, so it all makes sense why they're doing that. But they have just such a talented group up front, and everything else on the money line here, like I don't love. Are you really want to give up like minus 235 juice to take the Leafs? Like that's just not worth it in the rare off chance that San Jose would pull something out of nowhere. But the Knights are allowing an astronomically high 38.7 shots per game right now. Still no Stone, no Pacioretty. I think Edmonton is the way to go in terms of the money line tonight.
Paul, what are you going to do here? Money line, best one on the board.
I like the call that AJ made on the Oilers game, so I'll pivot to the other one that I like in the late part of the schedule. I look at the Kings visit to Dallas tonight at plus 130. They're longtime leaders that burst out of the gate. As Kopitar has 8 points, Doughty has 7 in the first 3 games, and they have some more depth at all positions after retooling their roster in the offseason, filling some holes. I'm very high also on their young goalie. Cal Peterson will likely get the start tonight and may actually play more than their mainstay Jonathan Quick this season. At the other end, I'm a little unsure of the Dallas squad. Scoring issues continue to plague this team, just as they have in their last couple of seasons, even though they have guys like Sagan and Radulov back and are at full strength this season. They've only scored 8 goals in 4 games so far. So I take the visitors to win big in Big D tonight.
Paul, what about a total? Which one is the best to target?
You know what? I think the total of 6 goals for the Sharks and Leafs is low tonight. On the one hand, Toronto has yet to score more than 3 goals despite a full roster. With 3 days off prior to this game, they had some good practice time, and I think they should be ready for this game and overdue for a breakout effort. Meanwhile, the surprising Sharks have scored 11 goals over their 3 straight wins and will face Toronto's third-string goalie, Mike Hutchinson, tonight. There will be a lot of action in the red light district in this one. Take the over big time. I also like the 5.5 line in favor of the over, again, as Boston visits Buffalo this evening. Look, I know the Sabres have scored 12 goals over their 3 wins to date, but I regard their goalie tandem as perhaps the worst in the league, and I expect the Bruins to expose Dustin Tokarski, a career AHLer, a bit tonight. It should be a points night for the Bees. In fact, in their top line, I think they're a must-play in DFS, and I say the Sabres score a few too, so this line should fall easily this evening.
AJ, I say best total to target. You say?
Well, first I say Paul clearly missed out going to rotowire.com before doing this segment. Otherwise, he'd know that Craig Anderson is going to get the start tonight instead of Dustin Tokarski, which I do think changes things a little bit. But overall, I still think Boston is in line to win that one. Having said that, I'll stick with Edmonton versus Vegas in terms of the total tonight. It's sitting at 6 to go over at minus 120. It's a decent spot. Plus, you get to hedge a little bit in case of the push. If you don't mind taking on that added risk, you can get plus 105 to go over 6.5. I talked about all the reasons that, the offense is rolling. We've got 2 big guns there in Edmonton, and then the Knights are lacking their star power right now. So I think there's a good opportunity for a big blowout, but I wouldn't expect a shutout from either netminder here. Again, Koskinen playing on the second night of a back-to-back. So goals aplenty in that one.
Guys, let's pop over to DFS here, and we've talked about the Oilers already. They are in action, and we have to ask you, are you going to pay up for Connor McDavid, or are you going to fade the Star Center's high salary, AJ?
Well, look, I mean, that shot total I mentioned or shots allowed total for the Knights is just too good to pass up here in terms of DFS. I think you have to seriously consider taking McDavid here. I know Paul's going to give you all the reasons to go with Matthews instead here, and I don't think that's a bad play. But we're talking about fading a guy who already has 6 goals and 11 points in 4 games, with over half of those coming on the power play. You go back to last season, 48 points in his last 20 regular season games. And he's, doing even better this year, almost averaging 3 points per game right now. I just don't see how you get away from using McDavid in this one.
Paul, you going to pay up? I know you want to. Come on, 9,200.
Absolutely. I'm in for the big payoff.
Yeah.
Look at the guy is on a mission this year with 11 points in 4 games so far. I don't know how you keep him out of your lineup, although I did last night and still wound up cashing in my DFS, helping to put AJ's kids through school. I don't know why he's being so mean to me. I will be including him this evening against the banged up Vegas lineup. It'll be showtime for that $9,200 price tag. If you want to save money, though, I think there are many good alternatives in the high rent district of the DFS board as well. So I would certainly consider Matthews. The guy had 16 shot attempts in his first game played. You get that for $8,500 tonight. I think you could see a repeat. I also like Anze Kopitar for $7,900. He's on fire, as I said, for the LA Kings. And Patrice Bergeron comes in at a discount for only $6,500 on what could be a point tonight for the Bruins.
All right, so if you're going to be paying up, you're going to be spending some cash, Paul, which I loved your style there. You and my wife would get along perfectly. Where could you find the best value here on the slate? Save us some cash.
All right, well, I'm going to give you a 1 each at forward, defense, and in goal. First off, the Maple Leafs may have really found something in Michael Bunting. He's got a couple of goals already and really showing a consistent knack for getting to the net, making the most of playing time with Nylander and Tavares. He should see plenty of scoring chances again tonight, and it'll only cost you $4,100. On the blue line, I like Matt Grzelcyk and view him as the Bees' second best scoring option on the blue line. He'll play around 20 minutes, including some power play time as well, which should provide ample opportunity to find the score sheet tonight. It doesn't matter who Buffalo's playing, AJ, in the Nets. Boston's going to roll them tonight. Grzelcyk only costs $3,400. It's not often that I will see a top goalie option available for only $7,400 either, guys. So I'm going to be using Cal Peterson of the Kings against the punchless Stars offense. Using these guys will get me the chance to load up on offense elsewhere.
AJ, you agree with that?
I'll look at some other options here. First, I'll start by reminding everybody at home to use Buffalo's Victor Olofsson at $4,400 tonight. I'm not moving off of him until he's over 5K on DraftKings here. So you can expect that take to continue for the time being. Outside of that, I do think grabbing Kailer Yamamoto tonight for $2,500, huge discounted price. And it looks like the Oilers are set to split up McDavid and Draisaitl for the first time this season. And that means Yamamoto is going to play on the second line with Draisaitl and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins moving over to the wing. And I actually like that assignment playing with those two guys better than, say, like a Jesse Puljujarvi, and he's significantly cheaper there too. So Yamamoto is almost a must, in my opinion, for this one.
Gentlemen, love y'all. Mean it. Best bets to target around the NFL this weekend is coming up next. Back for one, sorry, Cody, I was too tall there. Back for one more time, it's our NFL panel, DraftKings contributors Pierce Dietrich and Matt Meiselman, talking best bets on the DraftKings Sportsbook. Let's go. Favorite spread for Sunday, Matt?
My favorite here is a team that's really been struggling lately, but they're playing against another team who's similarly struggling, and I don't think people are really realizing it, and that's the Giants against the Carolina Panthers. So, first of all, this line's 2.5. I think at a certain point it's going to get back up to 3, which is obviously a key number. We saw a game end by exactly 3 in the Browns-Broncos game last night. But that being said, even with the Giants' issues at receiver, I just don't think the Panthers are a good team. And this is probably a much more evenly matched game than most people realize. The Panthers have had 3 straight close losses, but if you really dig into the numbers, the games weren't that close. They lost by 8 against the Cowboys, but they basically got there in garbage time and were down 3 scores late in the game and just, backdoored their way into a close game. They lost to the Eagles and they lost to the Vikings, and those were both games where they were outgained in terms of yards per play and many other efficiency metrics by a significant amount, and just the scores ended up being close. I think they had a blocked punt for a touchdown against Minnesota. So I just don't think the Panthers are a team that's playing well. I think they are kind of just on the Giants level, but for whatever reason, the Giants are getting points at home. So I do think there's a good chance the Giants cover, especially if you can get that lineup to 3.
Pierce, what do you think, dude? Favorite spread?
I like the Falcons -2.5. I know Matt's a little bit worried about this game, but I'm not at all. I think the Dolphins have all kinds of problems. You've got the Tua trade rumors. I don't think that's good for the team whatsoever. I know that the trio of Tua, Gesicki, and Waddle are going to get better, but as good as that trio could be or is, it didn't really help them when they lost to Jacksonville. So I like what Atlanta's doing. I think people saw that first week of Atlanta, and they really haven't forgotten it, even though we know that in the preseason the starters didn't play together. And so they came out and really disappointed people. But since week 1, this offense has gotten better every single week, and I think they're not going to have any problem here playing a Miami defense that's not very good whatsoever. I'm not expecting huge things from Atlanta, but they should be able to beat this Dolphins team that's struggling much more than the Falcons.
Well, Pierce, what about your favorite money line bet? You need to tell us, please.
I like the Bengals. I mean, this feels a lot like the Bengals money line bet against Pittsburgh a couple weeks ago. The Bengals don't go to Pittsburgh and win. Well, they did. The Bengals don't go to Baltimore and win. This is a different Bengals team. They've got a really solid defense that seems to be improving. They don't have any big names, so no one really is supporting them, but all around, the defense is playing pretty well. We know what they got with Burrow. We know what they got with Jamar Chase. And people are going to say, well, they're just hitting these big plays and they're not very consistent. Well, that's exactly the same thing as the Ravens. If you look at the Ravens offense, they hit some big plays. Lamar Jackson's going deep and nailing passes. So if you don't believe in the Bengals offense or can't trust them, then you can't really believe or trust in the Ravens offense. And on paper, or at least in reality, I guess, the defenses looked pretty even in this matchup. And I think also this line is an overreaction to last week. Yes, the Ravens beat the Chargers handedly, but we know that the Chargers are mercurial and they can look really good at times and really bad at times. What if the Ravens win over the Chargers last week was just simply a game where the Chargers had an off day? So I will take the Bengals in the money line.
All right, Matt, which money line bet do you like?
So I'm glad Pierce brought up this game again, because I'm going with the Dolphins at +115. And it should speak to my level of concern that I don't really like the spread here. I'd rather just take what I think is a coin flip at +115. Because if the Falcons do win this game by 3 touchdowns, I won't be shocked. I do think there's a chance the Dolphins issues they're dealing with lately, especially a quarterback, locker room issues, whatever's going on, like that could be a real thing and they might get crushed here. But the Falcons are also, they are dead last in the NFL in DVOA this season to this point. They've been the worst team so far, at least by Football Outsiders metrics. Their win that they just had was against the Jets. And other than that, they've played really poorly this season. They've had an easy schedule, and basically the only difficult game they had was in Tampa Bay, and they lost by 23 points in that one. Their other games came against Washington, Giants, and Eagles. So between that and the Jets, they really haven't faced anyone besides Tampa. Their one true test, and they got blown out in that game. I guess what's being priced into this line is that the Falcons are coming off a bye. They had the London game 2 weeks ago. The Dolphins just played in London, so the rest factor could be why this line is different than what I think it should be. So again, this is a game that could go any number of ways. I think weather could be a concern here, but to me, it just comes down to the Falcons are bad and the Dolphins are also bad. And I think this really is a coin flip game. So getting +115 just seems like a value to me.
How about your favorite Sunday total, Matt?
So this one will hurt me if I'm right for DFS, because this is going to be a game that many people are interested in, and that's the Eagles and the Raiders. I think for DFS, the game is probably underpriced, but I do think it should be a high-scoring game. We're looking at 48.5 right now, and the Eagles quietly are playing with as fast of a pace as any team in the NFL, and I think it probably will be more obvious that they don't run very much. And when they do run, it's Jalen Hurts. Like they're not playing a traditional running game, so I think their up-tempo style paired with the Raiders, who I think also are kind of an up-tempo team that just has happened to have leads recently where they haven't needed to air the ball out. They played from ahead against Denver, where that was a game where probably most people expected them to be trailing, but in the second half they just didn't have to throw that much because they surprisingly were up by so much in the game. But if we see a closer game here, I think it should be a back and forth matchup, and the total should be into the 50s. I'm not really sure why it's only at 48.5. I think both these teams are going to throw a lot.
Okay, Pierce, how about you, dude?
Finally, Matt and I agree on something. I'm also going to go with the over in the Philadelphia-Las Vegas game. Las Vegas, going back to last season, 16-6 in terms of going over their total. The defense, maybe it's improved, but either way, they've let this team down. And it turns into shootouts. And the Las Vegas offense has been great. Derek Carr is looking good. He's got all kinds of weapons. They seem to be improving every single week. Ruggs looks good. You know what you're getting out of Waller. You know what you're getting out of Jacobs. And on the other side, we've seen really good second halves from the Philadelphia Eagles. We've seen Jalen Hurts turn it on. If he could just play well to start the game, or just be average to start the game, or maybe not be as conservative, be a little bit more aggressive, and they might have to be in a game where you're going to have to play catch-up possibly, or outrace this high-powered offense in the Raiders. I see points coming. And even if it is just the second half, the Las Vegas defense should allow Hurts to pile up the points in the second half and get over this total.
Pierce, hook me up with your favorite player prop on the Sunday slate.
James Conner over 53.5 yards. We talked about this earlier in the week. And this is another one of these games with a huge 17-point spread. I just don't think the sportsbook's going to be that far off. So if the case is Arizona is absolutely way on top of Houston, then they're going to run the ball in the second half. And the running back that they give to most of their carries to on the ground is James Conner. This number is just way too low, especially when you factor in Houston's Texans rush defense was terrible last year. They're terrible this year. They got throttled last week by Jonathan Taylor. 53.5. I mean, he might go over that in the first half of this game.
Matt, favorite player prop is what?
So I'm going with a very similar bet. My rushing prop over is at 52.5. And I already mentioned the Giants. I think they can keep this game close against the Panthers. And I think that bodes well for Devontae Booker and hitting his rushing prop over. So basically what's happened the last 2 weeks with Booker starting is the Giants have been down by 2, 3, and even 4 touchdowns in their games. They've had to entirely abandon the running game. And Booker still managed 40 or so yards in both of those. I think this is a game where the Giants could potentially have the lead against the Panthers, but at the very least, they should keep it close. And if this game is close, I think this line is 10 or 20 yards too low.
All right, guys, we had a couple minutes left here in the show. So which game is your least favorite this week? Which game are you just not going to touch? You want nothing to do with, Matt?
So it's not a game that I think will be bad necessarily, but in the Packers game against the Washington football team, the line opened at 10.5, and we already have it down to 7.5. There's something going on there. Like, I'm not really sure why the line has moved so much. It made sense to me that 10.5 was too high. I thought like 9 or maybe 8.5 was somewhere like the right line, but now it's down to 7.5. And I just think at this point, just let this one go. Like, I think there will be people looking at this like, well, 7.5 is still good. Like, if Washington loses by a touchdown, I still cover, right? But you've missed a lot of the line movement already. I just don't think that it's worth getting into this one now. I do think there's a chance that this is a good football game. I don't think Washington is that bad of a team. It's just, I don't know what to make of this one, so I'm just staying away from it from a betting perspective.
All right, Pierce, bring us home. Which one are you staying away from a betting perspective?
From a betting perspective and not a DFS perspective, but Tennessee and Kansas City, I don't know what to make of this game. You've got defenses that struggle, which really opens the door to either offense to pour on the points. And last week, Tennessee absolutely shocked and surprised me by beating Buffalo. I know it's close. Buffalo probably was inches away from winning that game. Nonetheless, that game was a lot closer than I expected it, and I didn't think that Derrick Henry could simply carry this team to victory. And if he could do it last week, then why can't he do it again against Kansas City? Why can't he do it, at least to cover the spread? But I don't know. If Mahomes comes out and doesn't throw a bunch of interceptions, then it's very likely that Kansas City gets up by a couple touchdowns early. Tennessee has to start passing the ball. They abandon the run. They fall even further behind. We've seen that, or we saw that earlier this season when Tennessee got destroyed by Arizona. I don't know how this is going to play out. I'm sure a lot of it's going to come down to Derrick Henry. If he gets 40 carries again, then maybe they win. I'm staying away. DFS, it's great.
Yeah.
But sportsbook-wise, I don't know who wins or who covers this game.
Totally agree. I mean, if you brainwash Derrick Henry, again, to thinking that he is playing the Jaguars like they did last week, he's going to run for another 3 or 4 touchdowns. That's a show. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. If you have more NFL or NBA or baseball questions, all that fun stuff, watch the